Okay, so last time we did a little review of Romanticism. And so this time I wanted to kind of quickly go over Gothic literature and make sure everybody was correct on that. So Gothic literature is very much kind of universal. It's gone on for pretty much since the beginning of time. You can find Gothic elements as far back as Greek and Roman history, ancient Egyptian, and even all the way up into current modern day writings. So this is not necessarily something that's tied to this time period, though this is really when the birth of Gothic literature came about, and this is when most people recognize Gothic literature. Gothic literature is kind of this cool thing in the sense that it doesn't really have a specific time period associated per se with it. It has more to do with specific elements that are attached to the idea of Gothic literature. So, but here's why it comes at the tail end and kind of mixed up with Romanticism and then just a little bit before you get to Victorian, but it certainly kind of tapers off big time in the height of Victorian writing. And the reason why is it has to do with emotions. So if you think about it in terms of psychology, right? So you have these three different parts of the human being, according to Freud. You have the id, which is this prime, sort of inner childlike, what I need, basic needs met kind of thing. It's this inner thing of me. And then the part that most people see is the ego. And the ego is constantly trying to keep in check the id, and so it's trying to make me a respectable person. That's what I show people on the outside. And then the superego is what society tells me I should be doing. So usually most of the conflicts come between the superego and the ego trying to conform to one another. All right, but every once in a while the id just comes out in this primeval kind of rage or passion or whatever it is. So romantics take that and they deal mostly with the ego and the superego. Okay, so yes, there's passion there, but the romantics talk about the passion in terms of the ego. What is it allowed to do in society? How do I want to say? It's all about feelings. I want to feel this, and so I'm going to say this, and I'm going to do this. And then sometimes they'll talk about the superego, how society is trying to push it down on them, and they rebel against that. So that's kind of romanticism, right? And it deals specifically with the romantic gooey love, as you've kind of mentioned before. Gothic is similar, but different in the same sense. So it acknowledges that there's this light romantic side to us, but it also allows for the dark side. And that's something that romantics don't really do. They only focus on the positive, light feelings. So if I'm in love happily and with the blonde girl and or the handsome man or whatever it is. Gothic allows that more macabre, darker side that we have as humans, because we're complex. Not everybody is going to be sunshine and roses and cheerleader. Some of us like our coffee really, really black in the morning, and you don't talk to us for a while. Otherwise, there's problems. So that's Gothic. those are the ones that can handle more like dark mystery, kind of silent psychological thriller type movies. They don't mind necessarily watching somebody get dissected on TV with CSI. They kind of think that's kind of interesting, even though they don't necessarily want to pursue a career in that. Whereas the romantic person is going to want to watch, Mean Girls and I Feel Pretty and those kind of chick flick movies all the time. They don't want to see anything that they really have to think about. So that's kind of the difference between that. And so, anyway, so with that being said, then Gothic literature deals mostly with that id, and it's the dark id. It's all the stuff that comes out that is kind of primeval desires. All right, so for example, I'll kind of walk through a little example for you. The id would say, I want meat with blood. And so the Gothic literature is going to talk about how you kill food and eat it and relish in its blood. Okay. The ego is going to go next, and it'll say, let us then have steak over a nicely roasted fire and cook that the way that it tastes really delicious and I can enjoy eating meat. So then that would be how the romantics would talk about it, right? So they would sit there and they would discuss how to cook the steak the best and how that reminds them of whatever it is, and they're sharing this fine romantic dinner with their love. And then the superego is going to sit there and say, but society says that the best way to do that is not at home, but to go out to a steak restaurant and pay $100 for that steak. So that's the superego, is what society tells you to do. And that's going to be kind of where the Victorians come in. The Victorians are going to come in and say, yes, this is exactly how society should act. So that's kind of where it all goes. So the id in the Gothic literature is this very primeval, dark side that comes out. So with that, there are a couple of, characteristics of the Gothic, and that's kind of what I want to go over. The first one is definitely going to be the location. As with everything, location, 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 right? And so it's the same thing with Gothic. They are very much tied to the fact that there has to be a history. There has to be some sort of ancestral home, land, something connected to the past. Okay, so the Romantics connect things to the past and the idea that they want to move away from the past. They don't want anything to do with the past. It's a new way, it's a new love, it's a new life. The Gothic connects to the past because the past dominates the future. Whatever the mistakes were in the past, it overshadows and almost is the death of, or the reason why something cannot happen. And so oftentimes you'll find the conflict of the story actually is not within the actual story. It's decades earlier, and it's hinted at throughout the story. And so sometimes that gets to be the real problem, is unearthing what the actual root of the conflict is, because it may not be as obvious as everybody wants it to be. And so there's some sort of ancestral home, whether that's a castle or an actual house, just the land, whatever it is, there's some sort of thing that is tied back to the history. And it is dark. It's not the cheerful, happy place. It always has bad memories. It always has something associated with death. There's repression. There's something that is a huge black stain on the characters. And you can feel that, and the author usually tries to get you to feel that as the reader, in the sense that when the characters walk up to the house, the mood changes, right? So maybe they're happily married and they come back home, quote unquote, and suddenly, I feel like there's this burden on me that I can't get off. Or I'm a happy, safe young girl, and suddenly I walk into this strange, scary house, and now I feel, things that I've never felt before, and I don't feel safe, and I don't feel comfortable, right? And so there's always some sort of something. This is also then the other key thing is going to be landscape, and that's why the other three pictures have to do with landscape. So landscape, it's yes, still rooted in nature, same thing as with Romanticism, right? And so you'll have beautiful landscapes like this depicted, and the idea is this still that romantic core, that you find the sublime revelation of yourself within the land. All right, so while the house is scary and the castle is falling apart and haunted, or where the evil scientific experiment is going on, or whatever it is in the house, you break free from that to the landscape. Now, the landscape may still be dark and scary, but there's a comfort to that. You still can try to escape whatever is in the house. So the house and the landscape may be connected, they may not be, but the landscape is still always going to be what brings about the true revelation of who you are, that desire. That desire will come about on the landscape, whether it's the moors of Scotland, or whether it's, just the village life, whatever it is, that all happens in there. The other part of the landscape is the idea that it's solitary. You're not going to find the forest. You're not going to find the town littered with a whole bunch of things. It's solitary because, again, I'm going almost as a worship to find my one true self and what my desires are. And so you have single trees, you have a single house, you have very much pay attention to the singleness of it. The same thing goes with the characters. Characters are connected, yes, but they are also detached. And so while I'm married, I feel alone. I have friends, but I feel alone. I have no one who can understand me. I feel alone. So all these things that even if they're surrounded with a group of people, it's still very much that I feel alone aspect of it. Also pay attention to colors. Colors are going to be huge with Gothic. So again, a lot of dark colors. Usually the people wear black, which is kind of Victorian, but it's also just Gothic. The dark-haired girl is now going to be the hero or the heroine, the main character, as opposed to the blonde girl of the romantics. Things like that are going to come out. Also, everything is usually some sort of forbidden something, whether it happened in the past and that's what's affecting in the future, or whether that's what's going on right now. The love interest is always not supposed to be there. So that's always going to be one of the conflicts in there, and is what's going to happen. So that's kind of it. The last one is this last picture here. Again, back to nature. Nature in most of your Gothic novels comes to become a symbol of a character. And so usually the main character has the main landscape or the house, and one of the other characters has different types of things. It might be a dog, it might be a bird, it might be whatever. But every time you see that character, you will need to pay attention to what that nature marking is. And so, for example, if this was the landscape that was predicted or was depicted in the story, if it's calm, the character is calm. But if the landscape is being described stormy, then you should know before you even turn the page that the character that is associated with is having an inner turmoil and something is going to go wrong. Let's say it's, a ship on the ocean, and suddenly the ship crashes upon the rocks, right? Because of the storm. You should know that whichever character is associated with that ship is going to die within the next chapter. Like, you shouldn't even have to be surprised by that. It's coming. And sometimes even by the hand of whoever the storm represents, right? So if the water represents the woman and the ship represents the man, main characters of the story, then 9 times out of 10, the woman's going to end up killing the man. And so you shouldn't really be surprised when, oh my gosh, she pushes her off a cliff. Oh my gosh, never saw that one coming. Yeah, you should have, because he was talking about that the chapter before with the landscape. So the landscape very much plays a huge part in Gothic literature. So that's kind of where it ties in with Romanticism and the idea of nature being huge, love, but forbidden love being huge, this unbridling of emotions. It's just the dark emotions are okay and at the forefront. So that's Gothic literature, and that definitely segues then into Victorian literature, which we'll be doing next. Okay?